You'll die right here." Chloe's voice cut through the dark as the lock clicked into place outside the storage room door. I stood frozen, my breath trapped somewhere between my chest and my throat. This was my house, my late husband's house, and yet I was the one locked inside like I didn't belong. I pressed my trembling hand against my cardigan and felt them. The keys, cold, solid, still mine. Chloe thought she had all the power, but she had no idea what she'd just left in my hands. Before I tell you what happened next, if you've ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted, I'd love to hear your story. Please subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Sometimes, knowing we're not alone makes all the difference. My name is Natalie Brooks. I am 67 years old, and until a year ago, I believed I would grow old peacefully in the same house where I had spent most of my married life. The house sits on a quiet street in Charleston, South Carolina, white columns, wide porch, the kind of place people slow down to admire when they pass. My husband Michael used to say it wasn't just a house, it was a legacy. Every creaking floorboard, every sunlit corner held a memory we built together over 42 years. When Michael passed, the silence that followed was unbearable. It wasn't just grief, it was the absence of structure, of routine, of someone who always knew what needed to be done next. I remember standing in the kitchen one morning, staring at 2 coffee mugs before realizing I only needed one. That was when my son, Daniel, suggested he and his wife move in. Just for a little while, Mommy told me gently over the phone, "You shouldn't be alone right now." At the time, it sounded like love, like care, like exactly what I needed. Chloe agreed immediately, almost too quickly. "We can help you manage everything," she said, her voice warm and reassuring. "The house, the bills, your appointments. You don't have to go through this alone." I said yes. And that was the moment my home slowly stopped being mine. At first, everything felt comforting. There were more voices in the house again. The smell of cooking in the evenings. Daniel fixing small things around the house the way his father used to. Chloe organizing the pantry, labeling jars, bringing a sense of order to the chaos grief had left behind. I told myself I was lucky, but small things began to shift in ways I didn't notice right away. Chloe started handling the grocery shopping. "You don't need to worry about that anymore," she said, smiling as she took my list from my hands. Then she offered to manage the bills. "It's easier if everything is in one place," she explained. "We'll make sure nothing gets missed." Soon after, she suggested keeping track of my medications. "At your age, it's easy to forget," she added lightly. "This way we know you're taking everything correctly." Each change sounded reasonable, thoughtful even, but piece by piece, my independence slipped quietly out of my hands. I didn't see it clearly at first. It felt gradual, almost invisible, like someone dimming the lights one notch at a time until you realize you're sitting in the dark. Daniel changed too, though I struggled to admit it. He used to sit with me on the porch in the evenings, talking about work, about memories, about nothing in particular. But after they moved in, those moments became rare. He was always busy, always distracted. When I spoke, he listened, but not fully. His eyes would drift, his responses delayed as if something else occupied his thoughts. And Chloe was always nearby, always watching, always guiding the conversation. "She gets tired easily, Daniel," she would say when I tried to talk longer than usual. Or maybe we shouldn't overwhelm her today. At first I thought she was being protective. Then I realized she was controlling how much of me the world was allowed to see. Visits from friends became less frequent. "It's probably not a good day," Chloe would tell them at the door. "Natalie's been confused lately." Confused. That word stuck to me like something I couldn't wash off. I wasn't confused. I knew exactly what was happening. But every time I tried to say it out loud, Chloe would smile that soft, patient smile and gently correct me. "You're just overwhelmed," she'd say. "It's normal after losing Michael." And Daniel would nod. That was the part that hurt the most. Not the control, not even the quiet humiliation. It was watching my own son choose the easier truth over the real one. There were moments, small, sharp moments, that made something cold settle in my chest. Like the time I couldn't find my reading glasses for 2 days only to discover them in a drawer I never used. Or when my medication schedule suddenly changed without explanation, and Chloe insisted it had always been that way. Or the morning I opened the refrigerator and found almost nothing I liked to eat. "You need to eat healthier," Chloe told me. "At your age, we have to be careful." We, not me, we. It was subtle, careful, almost invisible from the outside, but inside the house I was becoming smaller, quieter, less certain of my own memory, my own choices, my own voice. The first person who truly saw it wasn't Daniel, it was Linda Parker. Linda lives 2 houses down. She's around my age, sharp as a tack and never afraid to say exactly what she thinks. We used to have tea together once a week on my porch. One afternoon, she stopped by unexpectedly. Chloe answered the door. "Oh, Natalie's resting," she said smoothly. "It's been a difficult day." But Linda didn't leave. "I'll just say hello," she insisted, stepping inside before Chloe could stop her. I was in the living room, sitting perfectly upright, not resting at all. Linda looked at me, then at Chloe, then back at me again. Something passed through her expression, something knowing. Later, when Chloe stepped out to take a phone call, Linda leaned closer. "Natalie," she said quietly, "are you all right?" I smiled. Of course I smiled. "I'm fine," I told her. Because how do you explain something that hasn't fully revealed itself yet? How do you accuse someone of harm when everything they do looks like help? Linda didn't argue, but she didn't look convinced either. As she left, she squeezed my hand, and that's when she noticed the faint bruise on my wrist. It wasn't large. It wasn't dramatic. Just a small mark where Chloe had grabbed me a little too tightly the night before when I tried to take back my medication bottle. Linda's eyes sharpened. "Natalie!" she started. I bumped into the counter, I said quickly. The lie came too easily, because even then, even with everything I was starting to see, I was still protecting my son. After she left, I sat alone in the quiet living room staring at my hands. That was the moment something inside me shifted. Not loudly, not suddenly, but deeply, because for the first time I allowed myself to consider a possibility I had been avoiding. This wasn't just overprotection. This wasn't just misunderstanding. This was something deliberate, something controlled, something planned. And then later that evening, I heard Chloe on the phone. Her voice was lower than usual, sharper. "Yes," she said, "I've been documenting everything." A pause. "No, he doesn't see it yet, but he will." Another pause. "I just need to make it official. Once we establish incapacity, everything becomes much simpler." My breath caught. Incapacity. I didn't move. I didn't make a sound. I just listened. Because in that moment, everything finally came into focus. Chloe wasn't just taking control of my home. She was building a case, a story, a version of me that would make it legal to take everything. And suddenly, Michael's voice echoed in my memory clearer than it had been in months. "Natalie, don't ever let anyone rush you into giving up control, especially not inside your own home." I sat there long after Chloe's call ended, my heart steady but heavy, because now I understood something I hadn't wanted to admit before. This wasn't about helping me. This was about replacing me, and I had been letting it happen. One small step at a time. There's something about old houses that makes secrets feel natural. Maybe it's the way the floors whisper when you walk too quickly, or how certain corners stay cooler than the rest of the room no matter how high you turn the heat. In our home, the study was always that kind of place. Quiet, steady, untouched by time. It had been Michael's room. Even after he passed, I rarely changed anything inside it. His desk remained exactly where he left it, a worn leather chair tucked neatly behind it. The shelves still held his books organized in that precise way only he understood. Sometimes I would step inside just to feel close to him again, and beneath that room, hidden in a place no one would ever suspect was the safe, you wouldn't find it unless you knew exactly where to look. Underneath the large Persian rug in the center of the study, there was a narrow wooden panel. It blended seamlessly with the rest of the floor, polished to the same warm tone. Michael had shown it to me years ago, late one night when the house was quiet and Daniel was still a teenager asleep upstairs. "Come here," he had whispered, as if the walls themselves might be listening. I remember kneeling beside him as he carefully folded back the rug. His hands were steady, deliberate, revealing the outline of the panel. With a small brass key, he unlocked it and lifted it open. Inside, embedded into the floor, was a safe, solid steel, old but immovable. "This," he said softly, "is where the truth lives." At the time, I laughed. I thought he was being dramatic. I don't laugh about it anymore. Back then, Michael never fully explained everything inside. He only told me enough to understand its importance. Not everything in there is about money, he said. Some of it is about protection. Protection from what I asked. He looked at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. From people who think they deserve what they didn't build. I didn't press him further. In a marriage that long, you learn when someone is choosing silence for a reason. After his death, I only opened the safe once. It was a quiet afternoon a few weeks after the funeral. The house still smelled faintly of flowers. People had sent lilies mostly, which I had always hated. I remember kneeling in the study, my hands trembling slightly as I unlocked the panel. The safe opened with a heavy, final sound. Inside, everything was carefully arranged, documents neatly stacked in labeled folders, a velvet case holding a small collection of jewelry pieces passed down through Michael's family, and an envelope, thick, sealed. My name written on the front in Michael's handwriting. I didn't open it, not then, because something in me told me that whatever was inside, it would change something I wasn't ready to face. So I closed the safe, locked it again, and returned the rug to its place. And for a while, I pretended it didn't exist. Until Chloe came into the house. At first, she didn't know about the safe, but Chloe was observant. Too observant. She noticed things most people would overlook, the way the rug in the study shifted slightly when vacuumed. The faint line in the wood, if the sunlight hit it just right in the afternoon. One day, maybe 3 months after she moved in, she stood in the doorway of the study while I was inside. "You spend a lot of time in here," she said casually. "It was Michael's room," I replied. She nodded, stepping further inside, her eyes scanning everything. "It feels important," she added. I didn't answer. That was the first time I saw that look in her eyes. Curiosity, but not the harmless kind, the kind that calculates. A week later, she brought it up again. "Did Michael ever keep valuables in the house?" she asked while we were in the kitchen. "Nothing unusual," I said, keeping my voice even. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You know, old families like this usually have something hidden," she said lightly. "Cash bonds, heirlooms, things they don't trust banks with." I shrugged. "Michael believed in banks," I replied. It wasn't entirely a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. After that, the questions became more frequent, more direct. Where are the important papers? Who manages the estate? Is there a will I should know about? Each time I gave her just enough information to sound cooperative, without giving her anything real. And each time I could feel her watching me more closely, studying my reactions, waiting for me to slip. The moment everything shifted came unexpectedly. I had gone out that afternoon to visit Linda. When I returned, the house was too quiet. Not peaceful, too quiet. There's a difference you only notice when something is wrong. I stepped inside, my instincts already tightening. "Chloe," I called. No answer. "Daniel." Still nothing. I moved slowly toward the study, and that's when I saw it, the rug. It was slightly off, not dramatically, not enough for anyone unfamiliar with the room to notice. But I knew that rug. I knew every inch of it, and it had been moved. My heart began to pound, not with panic, but with clarity. I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. For a moment, I just stood there listening. Then I walked to the center of the room and slowly pulled the rug back. The panel was still closed, still locked, but there were faint marks near the edges, scratches. Someone had tried to pry it open and failed. I didn't need to ask who. I already knew. Later that evening, Chloe acted as if nothing had happened. She cooked dinner, spoke gently, even laughed at something Daniel said, but every now and then her eyes would flick toward me. Searching, waiting. I met her gaze once, briefly, and in that moment, something unspoken passed between us. She knew I knew, and I knew she wasn't going to stop. That night, I sat alone in my bedroom, the house quiet around me. The keys rested in my palm, small brass, unremarkable to anyone else. But to Chloe, they were everything, because whatever she believed was inside that safe. She had already built a plan around it. A plan she was willing to risk everything for. And the most dangerous part? She didn't even know the truth yet. I closed my fingers around the keys, holding them tightly, because now I understood something I hadn't before. This wasn't just curiosity anymore. This was obsession. And obsession, when mixed with desperation, doesn't stop. It escalates. If Chloe had screamed at me, it would have been easier. If she had been openly cruel, openly hostile, I might have recognized the danger sooner. I might have pushed back harder earlier. I might have asked for help before things became so tangled, so quiet, so invisible, but Chloe didn't operate that way. Her cruelty was quiet, careful, designed to leave no clear mark anyone else could see. It began with small inconveniences, things that could easily be dismissed if I questioned them. One morning, I woke up and couldn't find my hearing aid batteries. I kept them in the same small ceramic dish on my nightstand. I had for years, but that morning, the dish was empty. I searched the bedroom, the bathroom, even the kitchen. Nothing. When I finally asked Chloe, she frowned slightly as if confused by the question. "Are you sure you didn't move them?" she asked. "I always keep them in the same place," I replied. She gave a soft, sympathetic smile. "Well, we all forget things sometimes, Natalie. That word again. Forget. Not lose, not misplace. Forget." By the afternoon, the batteries reappeared back in the dish exactly where I had left them. Chloe never mentioned it again. Neither did I, because already I could feel what she was doing. She wasn't just moving objects. She was moving my confidence, making me question my own memory, my own certainty. And once that foundation begins to crack, everything else becomes easier to control. The next shift came with food. At first, Chloe insisted on cooking healthier meals. Less salt, she would say. More vegetables. It's better for your heart. I didn't argue. It sounded reasonable. But over time, I noticed something else. Portions changed. Meals were skipped. Sometimes dinner would come late, so late that I had already gone to bed. Other times, I would open the refrigerator and find food, just not anything I could easily prepare or eat. "Oh, I didn't realize you'd be hungry," Chloe would say when I mentioned it. Or, "You should have told me earlier." It was subtle enough that I couldn't accuse her of starving me, but consistent enough that I was always slightly off balance, slightly weaker, slightly more dependent. Then came the medications. That was when the unease turned into something colder. Michael had always been meticulous about health records. After he passed, I continued the routine. My medications were organized, labeled, scheduled. At least, they had been. Chloe offered to take over. "It's just easier if one person manages everything," she said. At first, I resisted. "I've been handling it fine," I told her. I know she replied gently. "But you don't have to do everything alone anymore." That phrase, "you don't have to," sounds like kindness. But sometimes, it's just another way of saying you shouldn't. Eventually, I agreed. And slowly, things began to change. The pills looked the same. The bottles were the same, but the timing shifted. A dose that used to be taken in the morning moved to the evening. Another was reduced. Another increased. When I asked about it, Chloe always had an explanation. The doctor updated it. "This is the new recommendation. You probably don't remember the last appointment clearly." And each time Daniel would back her up. "Yeah, Mom, I think she's right," he'd say. "You've had a lot going on. A lot going on." That was how my reality started being rewritten, piece by piece, until even I began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, they were right. That maybe I was forgetting things, that maybe I was slipping, that maybe I needed them more than I realized. But there was a moment, small, sharp, impossible to ignore, that broke that illusion. It happened in the hallway outside the kitchen. I had been reaching for my medication bottle on the counter. Chloe grabbed my wrist, not violently, not dramatically, but firmly enough to stop me. "I'll handle that," she said. Her grip lingered just a second too long, just enough to hurt, just enough to leave a faint mark. I pulled my hand back slowly. "I can take my own medication," I said. Her smile didn't change. I know she replied, "But it's safer this way." Safer. For who? That night, I stood in the bathroom staring at the faint bruise forming on my wrist. It wasn't large, it wasn't obvious, but it was real, and it didn't come from confusion. It came from control. That was when I started paying closer attention, not just to what Chloe did, but to what she said when she thought I wasn't listening. One afternoon, I passed by the living room and heard her on the phone. Her voice was different, sharper, more precise. "Yes," she said, "I've been keeping records." A pause. Dates, behavior changes, memory lapses, everything. My breath slowed. I didn't move. I stayed just out of sight, listening. "No, not yet," she continued. "But it's getting there. I just need enough documentation." Another pause. "And Daniel, He's coming around. He sees it more every day. My chest tightened. Sees what? Sees the version of me she was creating. I know, she said softly. Once we file, it'll be straightforward. She won't even understand what's happening. File, documentation, behavior changes, incapacity. The words settled into place like pieces of a puzzle I had been refusing to complete. She wasn't just controlling my environment. She was building a case, a legal one, to prove that I could no longer manage my own life, that I needed someone else to take over, that someone being her. I stepped back quietly before she could notice me. My heart wasn't racing, not anymore. It was steady, heavy, certain, because now there was no doubt left. This wasn't misunderstanding, this wasn't overprotection, this was strategy, calculated, patient, and incredibly dangerous. That evening, Linda came by again. This time, Chloe couldn't stop her. I brought you some lemon cake, Linda said as she stepped inside, her eyes scanning the room quickly. I smiled, grateful for her presence. We sat together in the living room. For a while, Chloe hovered nearby listening. Then her phone rang and she stepped outside. The moment the door closed, Linda leaned closer. "Natalie," she said quietly, "something isn't right here." I hesitated. The truth sat on the edge of my tongue, but years of protecting my family held me back. "I'm fine," I said. Linda didn't accept that. Her eyes dropped briefly to my wrist. The bruise was still faint, but visible. Her expression changed. Not shocked, not surprised. Certain. "You don't have to protect anyone," she said gently. I looked away. Because the hardest part wasn't admitting what Chloe was doing. It was admitting what Daniel was allowing. After Linda left, I sat alone in the fading light of the living room. The house felt different now. Not just unfamiliar, hostile. Like something inside it had shifted permanently, and for the first time since Michael died, I felt afraid. Not of being alone, but of being erased. Not physically, not yet, but slowly, legally, quietly, until one day everything I had built, everything Michael had trusted me to protect, would no longer belong to me at all. And the most terrifying part, no one outside this house would see it coming. The dinner was Chloe's idea. "It's been too long since we all sat down properly," she said that morning, her tone light, almost cheerful. "Just the three of us, like a family, a family." The word felt fragile in my chest, like something that might shatter if handled too roughly. Still, I agreed, because part of me, some stubborn, hopeful part, still wanted to believe that things could be mended, that whatever had been building beneath the surface might soften if we simply sat together, shared a meal, spoke honestly. I spent the afternoon in quiet preparation, not because Chloe asked me to, she didn't, but because I needed something to steady myself. I polished the silverware Michael and I used on special occasions. I set the table the way he always liked: napkins, folded neatly, plates, centered glasses aligned just so. For a moment, as I stood back and looked at it, I could almost pretend everything was still the way it used to be. But that illusion didn't last. Dinner began calmly enough. Chloe had cooked a roast chicken, vegetables, something warm and fragrant that filled the house. Daniel sat across from me, his shoulders slightly tense, his eyes avoiding mine more often than meeting them. We ate in near silence at first. The clinking of utensils against plates echoed louder than it should have. Then Chloe set her fork down. "I think it's time we talk about the future," she said smoothly. My chest tightened, but I kept my expression neutral. "What about it?" I asked. She smiled. "About making things easier, more secure." Daniel shifted in his seat. "Mom," he said quietly, "we just want to help you organize everything. Organize." Another gentle word hiding something heavier. "I've managed just fine so far," I replied. Chloe's smile didn't waver. "Of course you have," she said. "But things change, and it's important to plan ahead." She reached beside her chair and picked up a folder. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't a conversation. It was a setup. She placed the folder on the table and slid it toward me. Inside were documents. Legal documents. Even without reading them, I could tell. Just a few simple forms, she said. Power of attorney, asset management, nothing complicated. Nothing complicated. My fingers rested on the edge of the folder, but I didn't open it. Daniel finally looked at me then. "We're just trying to make sure everything is taken care of," he said, "so you don't have to worry." I held his gaze. "And what exactly do you think I'm worried about?" I asked. He hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. Chloe stepped in smoothly. It's not about worry, she said, it's about responsibility, making sure your wishes are respected even if she paused, just long enough, even if what I asked quietly. Her eyes softened almost sympathetic. Even if things become more difficult for you later. There it was, the narrative, carefully placed, gently delivered. I closed the folder without reading a single page. I'm not signing anything tonight, I said. The temperature in the room shifted instantly, not visibly, not dramatically, but unmistakably. Chloe's smile tightened just slightly. Of course, she said, there's no rush. But her eyes said something else entirely. There was a rush, and I had just delayed it. Dinner continued, but the atmosphere had changed. Every word felt measured, every silence heavier. Daniel barely spoke, and Chloe watched me, not openly, but constantly, as if recalculating, as if adjusting her plan. After we finished, I excused myself, carrying my plate to the kitchen. My hands were steady, but inside something was unraveling, because now it wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was confirmation. They wanted control, legal control, over everything, over the house, over the estate, over me. I rinsed the plate, slowly listening. Footsteps behind me. Chloe's voice low. Daniel, we need to talk. I froze. Not visibly, just enough to stay unnoticed. Their voices moved toward the living room. I set the plate down silently and stepped closer to the doorway, just out of sight. She's stalling, Chloe was saying. She just needs time. Daniel replied. No, Chloe snapped softly. She's resisting. A pause. She's grieving, Daniel said. You can't expect her to just, you heard what the lawyer said, Chloe interrupted. The longer we wait, the harder it gets. Lawyer. So it was already in motion. She's still capable, Daniel said, his voice uncertain. I mean, she seems fine. Fine. I almost laughed. She won't be for long, Chloe said coldly. The words settled over me like ice. What does that mean? Daniel asked. Another pause, then quieter. It means we need to move forward before she locks everything away permanently. My breath caught. The safe. She was talking about the safe. And once we have access, Chloe continued, everything else becomes easier. Easier. Daniel didn't respond immediately. I leaned slightly closer, my heart pounding now. And what about her? He finally asked. A beat of silence. Then Chloe's voice, soft, calm, terrifyingly certain. She won't be a problem. The words hit me harder than anything she had said before. Not because they were loud, but because they weren't. They were deliberate. Final. I stepped back before they could hear me. My hands were trembling now. Not from confusion, not from doubt, from clarity. Because in that moment, everything aligned. The documents, the manipulation, the quiet control, the missing items, the altered medications, the conversations. It wasn't just about money. It wasn't just about the house. It was about removing me from the equation entirely. I returned to my room, slowly closing the door behind me. For a long time, I just stood there in the dim light, breathing, thinking, understanding, and then without fully deciding to, I reached into my drawer and took out the keys, small, brass, unremarkable. But now I understood their true weight. They weren't just keys to a safe. They were the last barrier, the final thing standing between Chloe and whatever future she had already planned. I closed my hand around them tightly, because now there was no illusion left, no denial, no hope that this would resolve itself quietly. This was a trap, carefully built, patiently executed, and I was already inside it. The only question now was how much time I had left before it snapped shut completely. There are moments in life that don't feel important when they happen. They pass quietly, without urgency, without weight. Just another conversation, another evening, another shared silence. You don't mark them. You don't hold on to them until later, until something shifts. And suddenly, those same moments return, sharper, heavier, filled with meaning you didn't recognize before. That's how I remembered Michael's final weeks. Not all at once, not like a clear story, but in fragments. Pieces that began to connect only after I understood what Chloe was doing. It was late autumn then. The air outside had already turned crisp, and the leaves in our yard had begun to fall in slow, steady waves. Michael spent most of his time in the study during those weeks, often sitting in his chair with a blanket draped over his lap, going through papers. At the time, I thought he was organizing things, preparing, letting go in his own way. But now, I know he was doing something else. He was protecting something. I remember one evening in particular. The house was quiet. Daniel hadn't come by that day, and the silence felt heavier than usual. I had just finished washing the dishes when Michael called my name. "Natalie," he said softly from the study. There was something in his voice that made me pause. Not urgency, not fear, something more deliberate. I dried my hands and walked in. He was sitting at his desk, a stack of documents in front of him, his reading glasses low on his nose. The lamp beside him cast a warm light across the room, but his expression was serious. "Close the door," he said. I did, and suddenly the room felt smaller, more contained, as if whatever he was about to say didn't belong outside those walls. He looked at me for a long moment before speaking again. "There are things I should have told you earlier," he said. My chest tightened slightly. "About what?" He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. "About the business, about the house, about Daniel." That last word caught me off guard. "Daniel," I repeated. Michael nodded. "I thought I had more time," he said, "but I don't think I do." I moved closer, sitting in the chair across from him. "You're going to be fine," I said automatically. He smiled faintly. "That's not what this is about." There was no fear in his voice, only acceptance. And something else. Concern. "For years," he continued, "I handled everything. The finances, the legal structures, the investments. You trusted me to do that." "I still do," I said. "I know," he replied, "but now I need you to understand it too." He reached into the stack of papers and pulled out a folder. "These are copies," he said. "The originals are in the safe." The safe. Even then, the word carried weight. I watched him carefully. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. Because something in me already knew this wasn't just preparation. This was warning. Michael folded his hands together on the desk. "Because not everything is as simple as it looks," he said. A silence followed. Not empty, heavy. "What do you mean?" I asked quietly. He hesitated. Just briefly, as if choosing his words carefully. "There have been irregularities," he said. "Small ones at first, transfers that didn't make sense, signatures that didn't match patterns." My breath slowed. "Are you saying someone is stealing from you?" He shook his head slightly. "Not directly," he said. "Not in a way that's easy to prove, but enough to raise concern." "Who?" I asked. His eyes met mine, and for the first time in our entire marriage, I saw uncertainty there. "I don't know," he admitted. That frightened me more than anything else he could have said. Michael was never uncertain. Never. "Then how can you be sure?" I pressed. He leaned forward slightly. "Because the pattern points close to home," he said. The words settled into the room slowly. Close to home. I felt a chill move through me. "Daniel," I whispered. Michael didn't answer immediately. "That's what I'm trying to understand," he said finally. "Whether he knows, or whether someone is using him." Using him. My mind struggled to process it. Daniel had always been kind. Maybe not as strong as his father, but never dishonest. Never malicious. He would never, I began. "I'm not saying he would." Michael interrupted gently. "I'm saying he might not realize what he's involved in." That distinction mattered, and it terrified me. Michael reached for another document, sliding it across the desk toward me. "These signatures," he said, "they're his, but the decisions tied to them, they don't align with how he usually operates." I looked down at the paper, my hands trembling slightly. "So someone is guiding him," I said. Michael nodded. "Or pressuring him, or manipulating him." The room felt colder. "Who would do that?" I asked. Michael's gaze darkened slightly. "That's what I haven't been able to prove," he said. A long silence followed. Then he leaned back again, his voice softening. "That's why the safe matters," he said. I looked up. "The safe," I repeated. He nodded. "Everything important is in there," he said. "The legal protections, the contingency plans, the evidence I've gathered so far." Evidence. My heart skipped. "If something happens," he continued, "you don't open it immediately. You don't show it to anyone, not even Daniel." The words felt heavy. "Absolute. You wait," he said, "until you're sure. Sure of what?" I asked. His eyes held mine steadily. "Who you can trust." The weight of that question stayed with me long after that conversation ended. But there was one more thing he said that night. Something I didn't fully understand until now. If anyone ever tries to rush you, he said quietly, to sign something, to give up control, to open that safe, you don't do it. I nodded slowly. Why, I asked, because part of me still wanted a simple answer, something clear, something that would make all of this make sense. Michael's expression softened, but his voice didn't. Because desperation makes people dangerous, he said, and the moment someone believes they deserve what's yours. He paused, then finished. They stop seeing you as someone they have to protect. The memory faded slowly, leaving me standing alone in my bedroom again. Years later, keys in my hand, Chloe's voice echoing in my mind. She won't be a problem. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting everything settle into place. Michael hadn't been paranoid. He had been preparing me for this. For the moment when the lines became clear, when love and danger no longer overlapped, when I had to choose not just what to protect, but who. And now, standing there in the quiet darkness of my room, one truth settled into my chest with absolute certainty. Whatever was coming next, Michael had seen it before I did, and he had trusted me to be ready when it finally arrived. The confrontation didn't come all at once. It built slowly over the next 2 days like a storm you can feel long before you see it. The air in the house changed heavier, tighter. Chloe stopped pretending as much. Her tone lost its softness. Her smiles became shorter, sharper, more calculated. And Daniel? Daniel grew quieter. Not peaceful quiet, avoidant quiet, the kind that fills a room with everything left unsaid. I didn't confront them immediately. I moved carefully, deliberately, the way Michael had taught me to when something didn't feel right. I watched. I listened. I paid attention to what changed and what didn't, because now I knew I wasn't imagining things. I was being positioned, and they were running out of patience. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon. The house was unusually still. Daniel had gone upstairs, at least that's what I thought, and Chloe was in the kitchen. I could hear cabinets opening and closing, the steady rhythm of movement that told me she was alone. I was in the study, standing over the rug. The keys were in my pocket, pressing against my hip like a quiet reminder of everything at stake. For a moment, I considered opening the safe, just to look, just to remind myself of what was inside. But Michael's voice stopped me. You wait, until you're sure. I exhaled slowly and stepped back. That's when I heard her. You're not going to open it, are you? I turned. Chloe stood in the doorway. Her posture was relaxed, but her eyes were no longer pretending. There was no warmth there, no softness, just focus. How long have you been standing there? I asked. Long enough, she replied. The air between us shifted instantly. No more pretense, no more careful politeness, just truth. And it wasn't gentle. I was wondering when you'd finally come back in here, she said, stepping further into the room. You've been avoiding it. I haven't been avoiding anything, I said calmly. Her lips curved slightly. Really, she asked, because it looks a lot like you're guarding something. I held her gaze. And it looks a lot like you're trying to take something that isn't yours. That was it. That was the moment everything broke open. Her expression hardened completely. Let's not play games, Natalie, she said flatly. We both know what's under that floor. No, I replied. You think you know. She took another step closer. So show me, she said. The simplicity of it, the directness, would have been almost laughable if it weren't so dangerous. No, I said again. The word felt different this time. Solid, final. Something in her snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. Her shoulders stiffened, her eyes darkened, and whatever thin layer of civility she had been holding on to vanished. You don't get to say no, she said. I just did. For a second we stood there in silence. 2 women in the same room, one trying to hold on to what was hers, the other ready to take it by force. You're being unreasonable, Chloe said, her voice colder now. This isn't just about you anymore. It never was about you. I replied. Her jaw tightened. Daniel deserves what's in there, she said. Daniel deserves the truth, I shot back. That hit something. I saw it flicker across her face just for a moment. Then it disappeared, replaced by something harder. You really think you're protecting him? She asked quietly. I know I am. She laughed then. A short, sharp sound that didn't belong in that room. You're protecting yourself, she said. You're holding on to control because you're afraid of what happens when you lose it. No, I said evenly. I'm holding on to it because I understand what happens when I give it to the wrong person. Her eyes flashed. "That's enough," she snapped. Before I could react, she moved. Fast, faster than I expected. Her hand shot out, grabbing my arm fingers, digging into my sleeves, searching. The keys. She was looking for the keys. I twisted away, pulling back, but her grip tightened. "Where are they?" she demanded. "I don't have them," I lied. Her fingers pressed harder, sliding along my cardigan, checking pocket seams. "Don't do this," she said through clenched teeth. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." I struggled, trying to pull free. "Let go of me," I said. "Give me the keys." She snapped. "No." The word came out stronger this time, and that's when the situation shifted from confrontation to danger. Her grip tightened painfully. Her other hand moved to my shoulder, pushing me back. I stumbled slightly, catching myself against the desk. "Stop," I said, my voice sharper now. But she didn't stop, because she wasn't asking anymore. She was taking. Her hand moved again, searching my other side, her breath quick, her focus absolute. And in that moment, I saw it clearly. Not frustration, not anger, desperation. The kind Michael had warned me about, the kind that doesn't stop. I shoved her back, harder than I meant to. She staggered a step, surprised, and for a brief second there was space between us. Enough for me to move. I turned toward the door, but I didn't make it. Her hand caught my arm again, this time pulling me back with more force. "Where do you think you're going?" she demanded. "Away from you," I said. She tightened her grip. "No," she said. The word was quiet, controlled, terrifying. "You're not going anywhere until I get those keys." My heart pounded now, not from confusion, not from fear of the unknown, but from the very real understanding that this had gone further than I had allowed myself to believe. "This is my house," I said. Her eyes locked onto mine. "Not for long," she replied. The words landed like a final warning. Something cold moved through me. "Daniel," I called out. Silence. No response. I called again, louder. Still nothing. Chloe didn't even flinch. "He's upstairs," she said calmly, "and he's not coming down." The certainty in her voice told me everything. He knew. Maybe not everything, maybe not this exact moment, but enough. Enough to stay out of it. The realization hit harder than her grip ever could, and for just a second, just 1 second, my strength faltered. That was all she needed. She pushed me toward the hallway, not violently, but firmly, controlled, step by step, until we reached the storage room near the back of the house. I stopped. "No," I said. She didn't answer. She just opened the door and pushed me inside. I stumbled forward, catching myself against the wall. Chloe. The door slammed shut, the sound echoed in the small space. Then the click, the lock. "You'll die right here." Her voice came through the door, calm, certain, as if she had already decided how this would end. Footsteps, then silence. I stood there in the darkness, my breath uneven, my hands shaking. Not from doubt anymore, not from confusion, from clarity, because now there was no illusion left, no misunderstanding, no room for hope that this could still be fixed quietly. This was no longer about control. This was about survival. And as I slowly reached into my pocket, my fingers brushing against the cold metal of the keys, one truth settled into my mind with absolute certainty. Chloe had just made the biggest mistake of her life. The darkness wasn't complete. A thin strip of light slipped in through the narrow gap beneath the door, just enough to remind me that the world still existed on the other side, just enough to make the silence feel heavier. I stood there for a moment, my back against the wall, listening. Footsteps faded down the hallway. Then nothing. No voices, no movement. Just the quiet hum of a house that no longer felt like mine. I closed my eyes briefly, forcing my breathing to slow. Panic would not help me. Fear would not open that door. And Chloe was counting on both. I pushed myself away from the wall and began to take in my surroundings. The storage room was small, cluttered, and faintly smelled of dust and old wood. Shelves lined the walls, stacked with forgotten things, paint cans, cleaning supplies, boxes filled with items I hadn't seen in years. It wasn't meant to hold a person, it was meant to be ignored. And that made it the perfect place to hide something or someone. I moved carefully, my hands brushing along the shelves, grounding myself in the physical space. Think. That was the only thing that mattered now. Think. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the keys. They glinted faintly in the low light. Still here. still mine. For a moment I simply held them, letting their weight steady me. Because no matter what Chloe believed, she didn't have everything, not yet, and that meant I still had leverage. The question was whether I could use it in time. I slipped the keys back into my pocket and continued searching the room. There had to be something useful. Anything. My hand brushed against a metal box on the lower shelf. I crouched down, opening it slowly. Inside were old tools, rusted nails, a small hammer, a screwdriver with a worn handle. Not much, but not nothing. I set them aside carefully. Then, as I shifted a stack of cleaning rags, something small and rectangular slipped and hit the floor with a soft thud. I froze, then bent down and picked it up. A phone. Old, scratched, the screen dull. For a second I didn't recognize it. Then memory surfaced. It had been mine years ago before I upgraded. I must have left it here during some long-forgotten attempt to clean out the storage room. My heart quickened. I pressed the power button. Nothing, of course. Too much time had passed. I turned it over in my hands, my mind racing. Then I tried again, holding the button longer this time. A faint flicker, then a dim glow. The screen lit up weakly, battery low, but not dead. A surge of something sharp and urgent moved through me. Hope. I sat down on the floor, my hands suddenly unsteady again, but for a different reason now. This was something. Not certainty, but possibility. The signal icon flickered. 1 bar. Unstable. Barely there. I opened the contacts list. Most of the numbers were outdated, old, irrelevant, but one name stood out. Harold Bennett, Michael's attorney. The man Michael had told me to call if anything ever felt wrong. My finger hovered over the name. Then I pressed it. The phone rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Then silence. No answer. The call dropped. The signal vanished. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay calm. Try again. I moved closer to the door, holding the phone higher. The signal flickered back just barely. I dialed again. This time it connected. Straight to voicemail. Natalie, Harold's recorded voice said, "Leave a message." I didn't hesitate. "Harold, it's Natalie Brooks," I said quickly, keeping my voice low but urgent. "I need help. I'm in the storage room Chloe locked me in. She's trying to access the safe. I believe she's already forged documents. Please call Linda Parker, tell her to come here. And call the police." My voice caught slightly, but I pushed through. I don't have much time. The signal cut out before I could say anything else. I lowered the phone slowly, my heart pounding. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't guaranteed. But it was something. I wasn't completely invisible anymore. I turned the phone back on, scanning for another contact. Linda. Her name was still there. I pressed it. The call struggled to connect. Static, then ringing. Once, twice. Then her voice. "Hello." Relief hit me so suddenly it almost made me dizzy. "Linda," I whispered, "it's me. Natalie. The line's what's going on." "I'm locked in the storage room," I said quickly. "Chloe did it. She's trying to get the safe open. I need you to call the police." A pause. Then Linda's voice changed. Not confused, not hesitant. Sharp. "I'm on my way," she said, "and I'm calling right now." The line cut again. But this time, it didn't matter. Because she had heard me. I leaned back against the wall, exhaling slowly. For the first time since the door locked, I wasn't alone. A sudden noise outside the door made me freeze. Voices, muffled, tense. I moved closer, pressing my ear gently against the wood. "This is too far," Daniel was saying. His voice sounded strained. "Uneasy. She's fine," Chloe replied. "She just needs to calm down. You locked her in a room," he said. "She was out of control." "No, she wasn't." A pause. Longer this time. Then Chloe's voice lower, more dangerous. "You're letting your emotions get in the way," she said. "We're almost there, Daniel. Don't ruin this now. Ruin this." The words settled heavily. "What exactly are we doing?" Daniel asked. And there it was. Doubt. Small, fragile, but real. I held my breath, waiting, because whatever Chloe said next, it would matter. "We're fixing a problem," she said simply. "She's your mother," Daniel replied. Another pause, then Chloe's voice colder than I had ever heard it. "She's standing between us and everything we've worked for. Everything we've worked for. The lie, the justification, the way she framed it, as if I were the obstacle, not the owner. And once we have access to the safe," she continued, "we can stabilize everything, pay off the debts, start over." Debts. So that was it. Not just greed, desperation. What if it's not what you think?" Daniel asked. It is, she said immediately. You don't know that. I know enough. Silence. Then Daniel again. What happens after? The question hung in the air, heavy, unavoidable. I pressed closer to the door, my pulse loud in my ears. Chloe didn't answer right away. And that silence said more than anything else. She won't be able to manage anything, Chloe said finally. We'll have legal authority. And if she fights it? Another pause. Then she won't. The certainty in her voice sent a chill down my spine, because I understood now. This wasn't just about the safe. This wasn't just about money. This was about control. Complete, permanent, and in her mind, already decided. Footsteps moved away from the door. Their voices faded, and once again I was alone. But not powerless. Not anymore. I looked down at the phone in my hand, at the tools on the floor beside me, at the door that separated me from everything I had built. And then slowly I reached into my pocket and touched the keys again, because now I understood something clearly. Chloe believed she had trapped me, but in reality, she had given me exactly what I needed: time. And one chance to turn everything against her. I don't know how long I sat there after their voices disappeared. Time inside that room didn't move the way it normally does. It stretched, slowed, folded in on itself. Every minute felt longer than it should have, every sound louder than it was. But one thing stayed constant: the clarity. There was no confusion left now, no uncertainty, no soft edges around what was happening. Chloe wasn't guessing anymore. She was acting. And Daniel was standing at the edge of something he still didn't fully understand. I shifted closer to the door, my legs stiff from sitting on the cold floor. The faint strip of light beneath the door hadn't changed, but somehow it felt sharper now, more real. I knocked once, not loudly, just enough. There was no immediate response. I waited. Then I knocked again. This time harder. Footsteps, slow, measured. They stopped just outside the door. I didn't speak right away. I waited, because I needed to know who it was. Natalie Daniel. His voice. Not strong, not confident, uncertain. I exhaled slowly. I'm here, I said, a pause. Then the faint sound of his hand against the door. I didn't know she locked you in, he said. The words hung there, fragile, incomplete. I closed my eyes briefly. Yes, you did, I said quietly. Silence. He didn't argue. That told me everything. I thought... He started, then stopped. You thought what I asked, that you were having another episode, he said finally. The phrase landed heavily. Episode. I leaned my forehead lightly against the door. That's what she told you, I asked. Yes, and you believed her. Another pause. I didn't know what to believe, he admitted. I let that settle. Because this was the moment, the one Michael had prepared me for. You wait, until you're sure who you can trust. I wasn't sure yet, but I knew I had to try. Daniel? I said slowly, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I am, he replied. No interruptions, I added. Just listen. A breath on the other side. Then okay. I closed my eyes, organizing my thoughts. Your wife has been controlling my medication, I said. She's been moving my belongings, isolating me from people, and telling others I'm losing my memory. That's not, he began. You said you would listen. I cut in. He went quiet. I continued. She has contacted a lawyer about declaring me legally incapable of managing my own affairs. Silence. Longer this time. Then, what you heard me, I said. That doesn't make any sense, he replied, his voice tightening. Why would she? Because once I'm declared incapable, I said she gains control over everything. I didn't need to say the last part. He understood, or at least he was starting to. That's not what this is about, he said, but there was hesitation now. Then what is it about, I asked. No answer. I pressed on. You said you have debts, I continued. How much, Daniel? A sharp inhale on the other side of the door. That's not your concern, he said. It became my concern the moment I was locked in this room, I replied. Another pause. Then quieter. It's a lot. How much? Hundreds of thousands. The number settled into me slowly. Heavy, but not surprising. And Chloe didn't tell you about all of it at once, did she? I asked. No, he admitted. When did you find out? After the wedding, he said. There were loans, business investments, things she said would pay off, and did they? Silence. That's what I thought, I said softly. She said we could fix it, he added quickly, that we just needed access to the safe. I finished. Yes. I leaned back against the wall, my hand resting over the keys in my pocket. Daniel. I said gently, what do you think is inside that safe? $1 million, he said without hesitation. Maybe more. Bonds, cash. Something your father kept hidden. Your father, not my father. That distance hadn't always been there. There isn't $1 million in that safe, I said. Another silence. He didn't respond immediately. Then, what there are valuables. I continued. Jewelry, documents, but not what Chloe thinks. That's not possible, he said. She's been sure about this for months. She's wrong. The words were simple, but they cracked something. I could hear it in the way he shifted on the other side of the door. That doesn't make sense, he said again, but softer now. It doesn't make sense because you've been given the wrong story, I replied. I let a moment pass. Then I added, what's in that safe is far more dangerous than money. That got his attention. What do you mean, he asked. There are legal documents, I said, ownership structures. Trust agreements your father put in place before he died. For what? For this house, I said. For future inheritance. For protection. Protection from who I hesitated. Then answered, from exactly what's happening right now. Silence, thicker this time. He knew Daniel asked slowly. He suspected, I said. Suspected what? That someone close to you was influencing your decisions, using your name, your trust. That's not... He started, but his voice faltered. Daniel, I said softly, have you signed documents you didn't fully understand? No answer. That someone else prepared, I continued. Still nothing. That someone told you were safe. A breath. Then, yes, the admission was quiet, but it changed everything. I closed my eyes because now the truth was no longer just mine. It was his too. She didn't just marry you by accident, I said gently. What are you saying, he asked. I'm saying she knew what she was doing long before you did. That's not fair, he said, but there was no conviction behind it. Isn't it, I asked. Silence. Then, after a long pause, what else is in the safe? I took a breath. There's an envelope, I said, from your father, addressed to you. His voice shifted. Sharper now. What's in it, I don't know, I admitted. I never opened it. Why not? Because he told me not to. Not until I was sure. Sure of who I could trust. The words lingered, heavy, unavoidable. On the other side of the door, Daniel didn't speak. Not right away, and in that silence I could feel it. The shift, small, fragile, but real. What if she's right, he said finally. What if you are just confused? The question hurt, more than anything Chloe had done, because it came from him, but I didn't react. I didn't let emotion take over, because this wasn't about winning an argument. This was about breaking through. Then open the door, I said calmly. What opened the door? I repeated. If I'm confused, if I'm unstable, if I don't know what I'm saying, then you have nothing to lose. He didn't respond. And if I'm telling the truth, I added, then you're standing on the wrong side of it. Silence. Long. Heavy. And then a sound. The faint shift of metal. His hand on the lock. I held my breath. Waiting. Because whatever he chose in that moment would decide everything. The metal on the other side of the door shifted again. Not loudly, not decisively, but enough to tell me that Daniel's hand was still there. Still hesitating, still caught between two realities, one built carefully by Chloe and one that was beginning to crack through from everything I had just told him. I didn't speak. Not this time. Because this moment didn't belong to me anymore. It belonged to him. Seconds passed, then a minute, then longer, and still. No click, no opening, just the faint sound of his breathing through the door. Finally, his voice came again, low, unsteady. If what you're saying is true, he said, then everything I've been doing. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Yes, I replied quietly. It means exactly what you think it means. Another pause. Why didn't you tell me before he asked? The question carried something heavier than accusation. It carried regret. I tried, I said gently. You just weren't ready to hear it. Silence again. But this time it felt different. Not defensive, not dismissive, processing. I thought we were fixing things, he said slowly. The debts, the pressure. Chloe said this was temporary. That once we accessed the safe, everything would stabilize. That's what she needed you to believe, I said. And if she's wrong, he asked. She is. The certainty in my voice surprised even me. But it was true. Then what's actually in there, he pressed. I shifted slightly against the wall, my fingers brushing the keys in my pocket again. This is the part you need to understand, I said. I took a slow breath. What's inside that safe isn't about making you rich overnight, I continued. It's about control, legal control, protection that your father put in place long before any of this started. For what Daniel asked. For the house, I said, for the estate, for future generations. He didn't respond immediately. Then, so we can't sell it, no, I said. Not without my explicit approval. And even then, it's structured to prevent a forced sale. A sharp exhale came from the other side of the door. That's not what Chloe said, he muttered. I know, I replied. She said once we got access, we could liquidate assets, pay everything off, start over. That's not how it works, I said firmly. Another pause. Then, what else? I closed my eyes briefly, because this was the part that would matter most. There are financial records, I said, evidence your father collected before he died. Evidence of what? Of transactions that didn't make sense, I said. Signatures that were yours but attached to decisions that didn't align with how you handled money. Silence, then quieter. You think I was involved? I think you were used, I said. The words hung between us, raw, unfiltered. How he asked. I don't know every detail, I admitted. But your father believed someone was guiding you, pressuring you, getting you to sign things you didn't fully understand. That's not he started, then stopped. Because now, he was remembering. I trusted her, he said finally. I know, she handled everything, he added. The paperwork, the investments. She said she had experience. And did you ever verify any of it? I asked gently. No answer. That was answer enough. She told me it was temporary, he said, that once things stabilized, we'd be fine. Daniel. I said softly, people who build plans around secrets don't usually intend to fix things. They intend to control them. The words settled slowly, painfully. And then, there it was, the shift. Real this time. Not just doubt, recognition. The envelope, he said suddenly. I opened my eyes. Yes. You said there's a letter. From Dad, yes. For me, yes. What does it say? I don't know. I said again, I never opened it. Why not? Because your father told me not to, I replied. Not until I was sure. Sure of what? I didn't hesitate this time. Sure that the person opening it was ready to face the truth inside. Silence. Longer now. Heavier. Because we both understood what that meant. I need to see it, he said finally. You will, I said. But not like this. Another pause. What do you mean, he asked. I mean, I said carefully that whatever happens next needs to be done the right way, with witnesses, with legal protection, with everything in the open. You don't open something like that in secret, Daniel, not when everything around it has already been built on lies. His breathing changed slightly, faster, uneven. She's going to lose everything, he said. The statement wasn't about money, it was about consequence. Yes, I replied. And me, he asked quietly. I closed my eyes again, because this was the part no one prepares you for. Telling your child the truth when the truth will hurt them. That depends on what you do next, I said. Silence. Then, I didn't know. I believe that I said. But you didn't ask enough questions either. The words were gentle but firm. Because love doesn't erase responsibility. It doesn't rewrite consequences. It only makes them harder to face. I thought I was helping, he said. I know. I thought his voice broke slightly. I thought this was what we needed. And now, I asked. A long pause. Then, now I don't know what to think. That was honest. And honesty, even uncertain honesty, was a step forward. Outside, I heard movement. Footsteps. Lighter, faster, Chloe. Daniel must have heard it too, because his voice dropped immediately. She's coming, he whispered. My body tensed. Listen to me, I said quickly. Whatever happens next, do not let her open that safe. She doesn't have the keys, he said. No, I replied. But she will try to get them. And if she does, he asked. I didn't hesitate. Then everything changes. The footsteps grew closer, stopping just outside the hallway. You need to decide, I said, right now. There was no time left, no space for hesitation, no room for denial, just truth, raw and immediate. Daniel Chloe's voice, sharp, controlled, right outside the door. His breathing hitched. I have to go, he whispered. No, I said quickly. You have to choose. Silence. One final second. Then the sound of his hand moving again on the lock. This time, not hesitant, decided. The lock turned. Not halfway, not uncertain, fully. The sound was small, but it echoed through me like something breaking open after being held too tight for too long. The door creaked as it shifted inward. Light spilled into the room, and there he was. Daniel stood in the doorway, his hand still on the knob, his face pale, his eyes searching mine as if he were seeing me clearly for the first time in months. For a moment, neither of us moved, because that moment, that single moment, was the dividing line between everything that had been and everything that would follow. "You're okay?" he asked. The question was simple, but it carried something new. Concern. Real concern. "I am now," I said. He stepped back, opening the door wider. I rose slowly from the floor, my legs stiff, my body still adjusting to the sudden rush of light and space. Every movement felt deliberate, grounded as if I were stepping back into a world that had almost slipped out of reach. As I crossed the threshold, I didn't rush. I didn't look behind me, because I knew exactly who was standing in the hallway. Chloe. And I could feel her before I even saw her. That tension, that stillness, the quiet calculation of someone whose plan had just been interrupted. She stood a few feet away, her posture rigid, her expression carefully controlled, but her eyes were burning. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice tight. Daniel didn't answer immediately. He closed the door behind me instead, a small act but a significant one. "I'm letting her out," he said. "She needed time to calm down," Chloe replied quickly. "You shouldn't have interfered. She wasn't out of control," Daniel said. "She was confused," Chloe insisted. No, he said more firmly this time. She wasn't. The shift was subtle, but undeniable. Chloe saw it too. Her gaze sharpened, her focus narrowing. "What did she say to you?" she asked. Daniel hesitated. Just for a second, but it was enough, and Chloe caught it. Her expression changed instantly, not to anger, not yet, to something more dangerous, control tightening. "She's manipulating you," Chloe said softly. "You know how she gets. She twists things. She told me about the lawyer," Daniel interrupted. The words landed cleanly, directly. Chloe went still. "What lawyer?" she asked, too quickly, too smoothly, but not convincingly. "The one you've been speaking to," Daniel said, "about declaring her incapable." Silence. For a brief moment, the carefully constructed version of Chloe, the composed, helpful, patient version, flickered, then returned. "That's not what that was," she said. "Then what was it?" Daniel pressed. "I was gathering information," she replied, "just in case." "In case of what?" "In case something happened," she said. "In case she needed support." "She doesn't need to be locked in a room for that," Daniel said. Chloe's jaw tightened. "That was temporary," she snapped. She was agitated. "No, she wasn't," he cut in again. The second interruption hit harder than the first, because now he wasn't just questioning her, he was opposing her. And Chloe didn't like that, not at all. "You're letting her get into your head," she said, her voice dropping lower. To Daniel replied, "I'm starting to think for myself." That was it. That was the moment her composure cracked. "You wouldn't even be here without me," she said sharply. "Everything we've done, everything we've built, you think that just disappears because she tells you a story." "This isn't just a story," Daniel said. "She's lying," Chloe insisted. "Then explain the documents," he shot back. "Explain the signatures. Explain why she says you've been controlling everything." Chloe's eyes flicked toward me for just a fraction of a second. But I saw it. That calculation again, that rapid adjustment, and then she smiled, soft, controlled. "Dangerous. You really think she's telling you the whole truth?" she asked. Daniel didn't answer, not immediately, because doubt, even now, still lingered. Chloe stepped closer to him, her voice lowering, becoming almost intimate. "She hasn't told you what's in that safe, has she?" she said. My heart tightened, because this was her last move, her strongest one. Daniel's gaze shifted slightly, just enough. "What's in it?" Chloe pressed. He hesitated. "Then legal documents, trust structures." Chloe's smile widened slightly. "And money," she added. "She said she's minimizing it," Chloe cut in. "Of course she is. That's how she keeps control." I stepped forward then. Just one step, but enough. "There isn't $1 million in that safe," I said. Chloe's eyes snapped to mine. "And you expect him to believe that she asked?" "I expect him to think I replied. That's exactly what I'm trying to get him to do," she said. No, I said calmly. You're trying to get him to stop asking questions? Her smile vanished. Because the moment he does, I continued, everything you've built starts to fall apart. Silence, heavy, charged, then a knock. Sharp, loud, unexpected. All three of us froze. Another knock followed, stronger this time. Police, a voice called from the front door. The word hit the air like a shockwave. Chloe's head snapped toward the sound. Daniel stiffened, and I felt something inside me finally release, because help had arrived. Chloe recovered quickly, too quickly. Stay here, she said to Daniel, already moving toward the front of the house. But he didn't move. Not this time. He stayed where he was, beside me. Another knock. Police opened the door. Chloe reached the front hall, paused, then opened the door. 2 officers stood outside. Behind them, Linda. Her eyes found mine instantly. Relief flooded her face. Is everything all right here? One of the officers asked. Chloe smiled, polite, composed. Yes, of course, she said. There must be some misunderstanding. We received a call about a possible welfare concern, the officer said. Chloe's smile didn't falter. Oh, that must be I made the call. Linda's voice cut through cleanly, steady, certain. She stepped forward slightly, her gaze unwavering. I was told Natalie was locked in a room. The officer's expression shifted. Slightly, but enough. Chloe laughed lightly. That's ridiculous, she said. Natalie was just, I was locked in the storage room, I said. Silence. Immediate. Complete. The officer turned toward me. Ma'am, can you step forward, he asked. I did. Slowly, calmly. Every step deliberate. I was locked in from the outside, I said. Without my consent. The officer's eyes flicked briefly toward the hallway, then back to Chloe. Is that true, he asked. Chloe opened her mouth. Closed it. Then she was confused, she said. I was trying to keep her safe. The officer didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stepped past her, slightly glancing toward the storage room. The door, the lock, visible, clear. Not internal, external. His expression hardened just a fraction. Ma'am, he said, turning back to me, did anyone prevent you from leaving? Yes, I replied. Another pause. Then the second officer spoke. We're going to need everyone to remain here while we sort this out. Chloe's composure finally began to crack, just slightly, but enough. This is unnecessary, she said. We can explain everything, I'm sure you can, the officer replied calmly, but we're still going to take a closer look. Daniel didn't move, didn't speak, but I could feel it. The shift, complete now. No longer hesitation, no longer doubt. Just the quiet realization of how close everything had come to collapsing completely. And as I stood there in the center of my own home, surrounded by truth, finally being pulled into the light, one thought settled firmly in my mind. Chloe's plan hadn't just failed, it had unraveled, and there was no putting it back together again. The house felt different the moment the officers stepped fully inside. Not just because of their presence, but because something long buried had finally been brought into the open, and once truth begins to surface, it doesn't quietly disappear again. Chloe tried to maintain control. Of course she did. That was who she was. Even as the officers moved through the hallway, even as one of them examined the storage room door and the exterior latch, she kept her posture straight, her voice calm, her tone carefully measured. This is all a misunderstanding, she repeated. Natalie has been confused lately. We've been concerned about her safety. The officer nearest her didn't respond immediately. Instead, he crouched slightly near the storage room door, running his fingers along the latch. This locks from the outside, he said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. Chloe's smile flickered. Only for emergencies, she said quickly. In case someone was there in emergency, he asked. A pause. No, she admitted. The silence that followed stretched just long enough to make the truth settle into the room. I stood beside Linda, her hand lightly touching my arm, steady, reassuring. Daniel stood a few steps behind us, still, quiet, watching. For the first time since all of this began, he wasn't looking at Chloe for answers. He was looking at everything else, the officers, the door, me, reality. We're going to need to understand exactly what happened here, the second officer said. I've already explained, Chloe replied. No, I said calmly. You've described something that didn't happen. The officer turned to me. Ma'am, can you tell us in your own words, he asked. I nodded, and for the first time, I didn't hesitate. She demanded access to a safe in my home, I said. When I refused, she attempted to search me for the keys. When she couldn't find them, she forced me into the storage room and locked the door. No embellishment, no dramatics. Just truth. The officer's expression tightened slightly. "And how long were you inside?" he asked. "I'm not certain," I said. "Long enough to realize I needed help." Linda spoke then. "She called me," she said. She sounded terrified. The officer nodded, then turned back to Chloe. "Ma'am, do you have anything to add?" Chloe's composure was still there, but thinner now, cracking at the edges. "She's leaving out context," she said. "Natalie has been experiencing memory issues. We've been trying to help her manage things." "Did she consent to being locked in that room?" the officer interrupted. Chloe hesitated. Just for a second, but it was enough. "No," she said. That word changed everything. The officer stood. "All right," he said. "At this point, we're going to separate everyone and get individual statements." Chloe's head snapped slightly. "That's not necessary," she said quickly. "It is," he replied calmly. There was no arguing with that tone. It wasn't aggressive, but it was final. Linda squeezed my arm gently. "I'm right here," she whispered. I nodded, because now something else was beginning. Not just exposure, not just confrontation, but consequence. And consequences have their own rhythm, their own inevitability. As the officers moved us into separate spaces within the house, I found myself sitting in the study once again. Michael's study. The room that had started everything. The rug still lay perfectly in place, the safe still hidden beneath it. And for the first time since all of this began, I wasn't afraid of it. Because now it wasn't just mine to protect, it was evidence. The officer assigned to me sat across from me, a small notebook in hand. "Whenever you're ready," he said. I took a breath and began again. But this time, I went deeper. I told him about the missing items, the altered medications, the conversations I had overheard, the lawyer, the documents, everything. I didn't hold anything back, because now there was no reason to. When I finished, the officer nodded slowly. "Thank you," he said. "That helps clarify things." "Will she be arrested?" I asked. He paused. "Not immediately," he said. "But this is serious. There will be follow-up." I nodded, because I understood. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something else. Something slower, more deliberate, but just as powerful. A few minutes later, there was a knock on the door. Harold Bennett stepped inside. He looked older than I remembered, or maybe just more serious. "Natalie," he said, crossing the room quickly. "I came as soon as I got your message." Relief washed through me again. "Thank you," I said. He glanced briefly at the officer, then back at me. "Are you all right? I am now," I replied. He nodded. Then his eyes shifted subtly to the rug, to the place where he knew the safe was. "We should take a look," he said quietly. The officer spoke. "If there are documents relevant to what's been reported, we'd like to observe." Harold nodded. "Of course." I stood slowly, my legs steadier now, my hands no longer trembling, because this moment had been waiting for me, for a long time. I stepped toward the center of the room and knelt, carefully, deliberately. My fingers slid beneath the edge of the rug and pulled. The fabric folded back, revealing the panel beneath. The officer leaned forward slightly, watching. Harold stood beside me, silent, respectful. I reached into my pocket and took out the keys. For a brief second, I held them there, in the open, where everyone could see. Because these keys, these small, unremarkable pieces of metal, had carried more weight than anyone else in that house had understood, until now. I inserted the first key, turned it, then the second. The panel unlocked with a soft final click. I lifted it, and there it was, the safe, unchanged, unbroken, still holding everything Michael had trusted me to protect. Harold knelt beside me. "Go ahead," he said, gently. I opened it. The door swung outward slowly. Inside, everything was exactly as I remembered. The folders, the jewelry, the envelope, and now, for the first time, I wasn't opening it alone. "Let's start with the documents," Harold said. I nodded, carefully lifting the top folder. He reviewed them quickly, his expression sharpening as he read. "These are solid," he said. "Very solid." The officer stepped closer. "Can you explain?" he asked. "These establish ownership and control structures that cannot be altered without Natalie's direct consent," Harold said. They also outline protections against unauthorized transfers. The officer nodded, then gestured toward the remaining contents, and the rest. Harold reached for another set of papers. His expression changed again, more serious this time. Financial records, he said, transaction logs. He flipped through them quickly, then paused. These signatures, and he looked up. At me, at the officer, at the doorway where Daniel now stood watching. They match Daniel's, Harold said slowly. Daniel stiffened. But the transactions, Harold continued, they don't align with standard authorization patterns. The room went still, because now, the truth wasn't just spoken, it was documented, proven, and then my hand moved toward the envelope, the one with Daniel's name on it. I hesitated, just for a moment, because this was the final piece, the one Michael had left behind, the one that would either confirm everything or change everything. Daniel stepped forward slightly. "What is that?" he asked. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. Not certainty, not denial, just truth waiting to be faced. "It's from your father," I said softly, "and it's time you read it." For a moment, no one moved. The envelope rested in my hands, thin, unassuming, yet heavier than anything else in that room. Michael's handwriting stretched across the front in familiar strokes, Daniel. I had carried that envelope in my memory for months, protected it, avoided it, waited for the moment when opening it wouldn't just reveal truth, but force it into the open. And now, that moment had arrived. Daniel stepped closer, slowly, cautiously, as if the distance between us held something fragile that might break if he moved too quickly. "Can I?" he asked. His voice was quieter than I had ever heard it, not defensive, not certain, just unsure. I looked at him for a long second, because this wasn't just about what was inside that envelope. It was about what he was ready to face. "You can," I said, "but you need to understand something first." He nodded. I continued, "Whatever is in that letter, your father wrote it because he believed you deserved the truth." Daniel swallowed, "And the truth doesn't always feel like something you want to hear." "I know," he said, but I could tell he didn't. "Not yet." I extended the envelope. He took it carefully, as if it might burn him, or change him, or both. The room remained silent, the officer, Harold, Linda, all watching but not interrupting. Because some moments don't belong to anyone else. Daniel ran his thumb along the edge of the envelope, then broke the seal. The sound was small, but final. He unfolded the letter slowly, his eyes scanning the first lines, and then something shifted. Not immediately, not dramatically, but visibly. His shoulders stiffened, his breath changed, and his expression collapsed. "What is it?" Chloe's voice cut in sharply from the doorway. I turned. She'd been standing there the entire time, watching, waiting, calculating. Now her composure was gone, replaced by urgency. "Daniel," she pressed. He didn't answer. He kept reading, line by line, word by word, as if each sentence pulled him deeper into something he could no longer deny. "Daniel," she said again, stepping forward. "What does it say?" His hands trembled slightly, then stilled, and finally he spoke. "It says," his voice cracked slightly, "it says you've been doing this for longer than I thought." Chloe froze. What she said. He looked up, not at me, at her. "It says you started manipulating financial decisions before we even got married," he continued. "That you introduced me to those investments, that you encouraged me to sign documents quickly, without review." "That's not true," Chloe said immediately, but her voice, it wasn't steady anymore. Daniel didn't stop. "It says Dad noticed patterns," he went on, "that the transactions increased after you became involved, that the risk escalated." "That's speculation," Chloe snapped. He didn't understand. He documented everything Daniel said, cutting her off. That stopped her. For a second, just a second. But it was enough. "Daniel, listen to me," she said, stepping closer, her voice softening, shifting again back into something familiar, something persuasive. "He didn't like me from the beginning. You know that." Daniel shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "That's not what this says." He looked back down at the letter, then read aloud, "If you are reading this, it means something has gone wrong. I want you to understand this clearly, Daniel. I do not believe you intended harm, but I do believe you were guided into decisions that were not your own." The room felt still, compressed, like everything inside it had been pulled inward. The person influencing you does not see this family the way we do. They see opportunity, leverage, control. Chloe's jaw tightened. That's his opinion, she said. Daniel kept reading, ignoring her. If I am correct, then by the time you read this, the situation will have escalated. You may feel trapped. You may feel responsible. You may even feel that there is no way out without losing everything. Daniel's breathing grew uneven, because those words, they weren't just accurate, they were personal, precise. But there is always a way out. It begins with truth, silence, heavy, final. Daniel lowered the letter slowly. His eyes didn't move immediately. They stayed fixed on the page, as if hoping the words might rearrange themselves into something easier to accept, something less devastating, but they didn't. They stayed exactly as they were. Truth doesn't soften itself. It doesn't adjust for comfort. It simply waits to be acknowledged. Chloe stepped closer. Daniel, she said, her voice tight now. You're letting this control you. It's just a letter. No, he said. The word was quiet, but absolute. It's not just a letter. He finally looked at her, and this time, there was no hesitation in his eyes, only clarity. You knew he said, I didn't, you knew he repeated. Chloe's composure cracked further. I did what I had to do, she said. The words slipped out before she could stop them, and once they were out, there was no taking them back. The room went still. Even the officer shifted slightly, because that wasn't denial. That was justification. Daniel stared at her, as if seeing her for the first time. What does that mean, he asked. It means we were drowning, she said. It means we needed a way out. It means I did what was necessary to protect us. By lying, he said. By surviving, she snapped. By using me, he corrected. Silence. Then yes, she said. The honesty was sudden, sharp, almost defiant, because now there was no point in pretending anymore. Everything was already exposed. I used what was available, she continued. What's wrong with that? Everyone does it. Not like this, Daniel said. You don't get to judge me now, she shot back. Not when you signed those papers. Not when you benefited from every decision we made. I didn't know, he said. You didn't ask, she replied. That hit. Because it was true. But truth, even partial truth, doesn't erase responsibility, it just complicates it. I trusted you, he said, and I gave you everything, she said, a plan, a future, a way out, at the cost of my mother, he said. Chloe didn't answer, because there was no answer that could fix that. The officer stepped forward then. Ma'am, he said to Chloe, we're going to need you to come with us. Chloe turned sharply. This is ridiculous, she said. This is a family matter. This is now a legal matter, he replied calmly. Her eyes flicked to Daniel. Desperate now, searching. Daniel, she said, say something. He didn't, not this time. He stood still, the letter still in his hand, the truth still in front of him. And for the first time, he didn't move to protect her. The officers stepped closer. Chloe didn't resist. But she didn't look at me. She kept her eyes on Daniel, even as they led her toward the door, because in the end, that was the only thing that mattered to her. Control, and she had just lost it. The door closed behind them. The house fell silent again. But it wasn't the same silence as before. This one was different, because now everything that had been hidden was finally visible, and there was no going back. The house didn't feel like mine again right away. People think that once the truth comes out, everything settles, that clarity brings peace, that justice, once set in motion, restores what was broken. But that's not how it works. Not at first. In the days that followed, the house felt like a place where something had happened. Not just something painful, but something that had changed the shape of everything inside it. Chloe was gone, taken into custody that night, but her absence didn't immediately bring relief. It brought space. And in that space, everything she had done became more visible, more real. The routines she had controlled disappeared overnight. No one adjusted my medications. No one monitored my meals. No one filtered who I could speak to or when. And yet for the first few days, I caught myself hesitating, second-guessing, reaching for permission that was no longer needed. That was the part no one warns you about. Control doesn't end when the person leaves. It lingers, in habits, in thoughts, in the quiet question of whether you're still allowed to trust yourself. Linda stayed with me that first night. She didn't say much. She didn't need to. Just having someone in the house who wasn't watching me, wasn't calculating, wasn't managing. That alone felt like something I'd forgotten existed. "You did the right thing," she said at one point as we sat in the living room. I nodded, but I didn't answer, because doing the right thing doesn't always feel like winning. Sometimes it just feels like surviving something you never should have had to face. Daniel stayed too, but not in the same way. He kept his distance, physically, emotionally, as if he understood that proximity didn't equal trust anymore. And he was right, it didn't. The next morning, Harold arrived early. He carried a briefcase as always, but there was something different in his expression. Less formal, more protective. "We have work to do," he said gently. I nodded, because I knew what that meant. The legal process had already begun. Chloe was being held for questioning, unlawful restraint, possible financial fraud, forgery. The charges would take time to formalize, but the foundation was there, solid, documented, real. But Harold wasn't just there to talk about Chloe. He was there to protect what remained. We sat in the study again. The same room, the same desk, but everything felt different now, because now nothing was hidden. He opened his briefcase and laid out several documents. "We need to restructure your protections," he said, immediately. "I thought Michael already did that," I replied. "He did," Harold said, "but what he created was a safeguard against the unknown. What we're dealing with now is something that has already happened." I understood. There's a difference between preventing danger and responding to it after it arrives. "We'll reinforce the trust structures," he continued. "Add oversight. Limit any possibility of unauthorized access or manipulation." "And Daniel?" I asked. Harold paused, carefully, because that was the question that mattered most. "That depends on you," he said. I looked down at my hands, because love, even after everything, doesn't disappear, but it changes. It becomes something more complicated, more careful. "I don't want to cut him out," I said. "And you don't have to," Harold replied. "But inclusion doesn't mean access. Not anymore." The distinction settled into me slowly. Clear, necessary, painful. "I'll set conditions," he continued. "Accountability measures, transparency requirements. If he meets them, he remains part of the structure. And if he doesn't," Harold didn't hesitate, "then he doesn't." Simple, direct, unavoidable. That was the difference now. No more assumptions, no more blind trust. Everything had to be earned, even within a family. Later that afternoon, Daniel came into the study. He didn't knock, but he didn't walk in casually either. He stopped just inside the doorway, waiting. "Can we talk?" he asked. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. Not confidence, not certainty, just humility. "Yes," I said. Harold stood. "I'll give you some time," he said, quietly, gathering his papers and stepping out. The door closed softly behind him, and suddenly it was just the two of us, mother and son, but not in the way it used to be. Daniel stepped further into the room, his movements slower, more deliberate. "I don't know where to start," he said. "That's all right," I replied. "Start anywhere." He exhaled. "I'm sorry," he said. The words were simple, but they weren't enough, and he knew it. "I should have listened," he continued. "I should have asked questions. I should have seen what was happening." "Yes," I said. There was no anger in my voice, but there was truth. And truth doesn't soften itself just because it hurts. I didn't want to believe it, he admitted. It was easier to trust her than to question everything. "I understand that," I said, because I did. Denial isn't weakness, it's comfort. And comfort is hard to let go of. But understanding it doesn't undo it, I added. He nodded. "I know." Silence settled between us. Not heavy this time, just real. "What happens now?" he asked. I leaned back slightly in my chair, considering, because this wasn't a question with a simple answer. "You rebuild," I said. How slowly I replied. Honestly, without shortcuts. He swallowed. "And us?" he asked. That question, that was harder, because it wasn't about systems or structures or legal protections. It was about something deeper, something more fragile. "I don't know yet," I said. The honesty in that answer seemed to hit him harder than anything else. "You don't trust me," he said. Not the way I used to, I replied. The words hung there. But they needed to, because pretending otherwise would only repeat the same mistake. Can I earn it back? He asked. I looked at him, and for a moment I saw the boy he used to be. The one who sat on the porch with his father. The one who believed the world made sense. The one who hadn't learned yet how complicated people can be. Yes, I said, but not quickly. He nodded. I'll do whatever it takes. I'm not asking for promises, I said. I'm asking for consistency. The difference mattered. Promises are easy, consistency isn't. I understand, he said. And this time, I believed him. Not completely, not yet, but enough to let the possibility exist. That evening, as the sun set outside the windows of the house I had almost lost, I found myself standing in the study again, alone. The safe was closed, locked, back where it belonged. But something had changed. Not the contents, not the structure, me. Because for the first time since Michael died, I wasn't holding onto it out of fear. I was holding onto it with clarity, with purpose, with understanding. And that made all the difference. The first night I slept without the keys in my hand, I woke up twice. Not because of noise, not because of fear, but because my body didn't recognize the absence. For months, those keys had been a quiet constant resting in my palm as I slept tucked beneath my pillow, always within reach. They had become more than metal, more than access. They had become a kind of reassurance, control, proof that something, anything, was still mine. And now, they weren't. Not because I had lost them, but because I had chosen to let them go. That choice didn't come easily. Nothing about the weeks that followed came easily. Chloe's case moved forward steadily. The charges became clearer, more defined unlawful restraint, financial manipulation, forgery tied to the documents Harold had uncovered. There were interviews, statements, follow-ups, each step slow, deliberate, necessary. I didn't attend every hearing. I didn't need to, because I already knew what mattered. The truth had been established. Everything else was process. Daniel cooperated fully. That surprised some people. It didn't surprise me, because once he had seen the full picture, once denial was no longer possible, there was no path forward that didn't involve accountability. He met with investigators, provided records, answered questions, not defensively, not reluctantly, honestly. That didn't erase what had happened, but it mattered, because growth doesn't come from pretending something didn't happen. It comes from facing it. Even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's painful, even when it changes how you see yourself. We didn't live together anymore. That was one of the first boundaries I set. Not out of anger, not out of punishment, but out of necessity. Some things need distance to heal, and trust. Trust needs space to rebuild. Daniel found a small apartment across town. Nothing extravagant, just enough. He visited occasionally, always respectfully, always asking, never assuming, that more than anything else told me he was beginning to understand. Linda remained a constant, more than a neighbor now, more than a friend. She became something closer to family, the kind you choose, the kind that stays not because they have to, but because they want to. We developed a new routine. Morning coffee on the porch, evening walks down the street. Conversations that didn't carry tension beneath them. Simple things, the kind of things that had once felt ordinary, but now felt earned. Harold finalized the legal restructuring within a month. The estate was secure, protected, layered with safeguards that ensured no one, not even Daniel, could access or alter anything without transparency and oversight. It wasn't about control anymore. It was about clarity, about making sure that what Michael had built and what I had protected would remain intact, not just for now, but for whatever came next. The safe remained where it had always been, hidden beneath the floor, unchanged. But I didn't visit it the same way anymore, not with urgency, not with fear, only when necessary, and eventually, not at all. One afternoon, about 3 months after everything happened, I went into the study. The house was quiet, peaceful in a way it hadn't been for a long time. I stood in the center of the room looking down at the rug, knowing exactly what lay beneath it, and for a moment I considered leaving it there, untouched, closed, as it had been, but something inside me had shifted, not just in how I saw the safe, but in how I saw myself. So I knelt, folded the rug back, unlocked the panel, and opened it. The contents were the same, carefully arranged, unchanged, but they didn't feel heavy anymore. They didn't feel like something I had to guard at all costs. They felt like something I could choose what to do with, and that was new. Harold had suggested moving everything into professional management, secure, accountable, documented. At first I hesitated, because letting go, even when it's the right thing, still feels like loss. But I understood now. Control isn't about holding on to something tightly. It's about knowing when to release it safely. So I did. Over the next week, we transferred everything. The documents, the jewelry, the records, all placed under structured protection. Transparent, monitored, secure, nothing hidden, nothing vulnerable. And when it was done, the safe was empty. For the first time since Michael had shown it to me all those years ago. Empty. I closed it slowly, locked it, and replaced the panel. The rug settled back into place, seamless, as if nothing had ever been there. But I knew, and that was enough. Later that evening, I sat on the porch with Linda. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the yard. The air felt lighter, easier. "You look different," she said. I smiled slightly. "I feel different," I replied. She nodded. "Good," she said. We sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then she glanced at me. "What did you do with the keys?" she asked. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the small wooden box I had placed them in earlier that day. Simple, unremarkable. I opened it briefly. The brass keys rested inside, still the same, but no longer something I needed to carry. "I put them away," I said. Linda studied me for a moment, then smiled. "About time," she said. I laughed softly, because she was right. It was about time, not just to put the keys away, but to stop living as if everything depended on holding them tightly. Because it didn't. Not anymore. Daniel came by the next day. We sat on the porch, the same place we used to sit years ago, the same place that had felt so distant not long ago. He didn't say much, neither did I. But that was all right. Because not everything needs to be said immediately. Some things take time. He looked at me after a while. "I'm still working on everything he said." "I know," I replied. "I don't expect you to trust me yet. I know that too." He nodded. Then, "But I will earn it back." I looked at him, and for the first time since everything happened, I didn't feel uncertainty. I felt possibility. "We'll see," I said gently, and that was enough. Because trust doesn't come back in a moment. It builds, slowly, steadily, over time. That night, I went to bed. No keys in my hand, no weight beneath my pillow, just quiet. And for the first time in a long time, I slept. Deeply. Peacefully. Not because everything was perfect, not because everything had been fixed, but because something inside me had changed. I wasn't holding on to control out of fear anymore. I wasn't guarding something just to keep it from being taken. I had learned something more important. Something Michael had tried to teach me all along. The real power was never in the safe, or the keys, or the documents. It was in knowing when to stand firm, and when to let go. There's a quiet truth many of us don't talk about, especially as we grow older. Sometimes the people we love don't just disappoint us. They test the very boundaries of what we are willing to tolerate in the name of family. For a long time, I believed that love meant patience, that it meant understanding, that it meant giving second chances even when something didn't feel right. But what I had to learn is this: love without boundaries is not kindness, it's surrender. And surrender in the wrong hands becomes permission. If there is one thing I want you to take from my story, it's this. Listen to the small signs, the quiet discomfort, the moments that don't make sense but are easy to ignore, because those are often the truths we try hardest not to see. And by the time they become impossible to ignore, they've already grown. Protecting yourself doesn't make you selfish. Setting boundaries doesn't make you unkind. And choosing clarity over comfort doesn't make you cold. It makes you strong. It means you are still standing in your own life instead of slowly disappearing from it. If you've ever been in a situation where something felt wrong, but you weren't sure if you were overthinking, I want to hear from you. Where are you watching? From what time is it there right now? And most importantly, what would you have done in my place? If this story meant something to you, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. because sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is remind each other that we are not alone.